You didn't choose most of what runs through your mind. You didn't choose what unsettles you. You didn't choose what soothes you. You didn't choose what you learned to call normal. Even now, while you believe you're awake, something inside you still reacts as if guided by unseen hands. You notice it in small moments. A vague discomfort without a name. A pause before a decision. An impulse that appears before thought has time to form. Stop for a second. Notice it. Why do some ideas feel instantly right to you? Why does guilt show up without a clear cause? Who placed that weight inside your chest? Be quiet for a moment. Breathe. That sensation of being watched doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within, from a very old place. A place that existed before choice was even possible. A place where you didn't decide. You absorbed. Everything entered freely, without permission, and went deep. It arrived early. Maybe too early. Do you remember the first time you were afraid of getting it wrong? Or the first time you felt you needed to fit in? Of course you don't, because it happened before memory had language. Before you could name fear. Before you could choose. Short phrases repeated again and again. Looks of approval. Looks of disappointment. Silences that lingered too long. Subtle changes in tone. Daily routines. Ordinary gestures. All of it shaped something inside you while you still believed the world was simply the world. And now, years later, something in you still responds the same way. An automatic yes. A no that never quite makes it out. A direction followed without question. You sense that something doesn't fully align. That beneath your current identity, there's another layer. One that's never been revisited, never examined. And perhaps that layer decides far more of your life than you'd like to admit. Looking at it isn't comfortable. It was never meant to be, because when you look closely, you begin to see that many of your certainties didn't come from reflection, but from repetition. And repetition leaves grooves. Grooves become paths. Paths lead somewhere. And you may be living inside a destination you never consciously selected. There's no accusation here. No explanation yet. Just observation. Just feeling. Notice the slight tension forming in your chest as something begins to shift. When a quiet truth approaches, the body senses it before the mind does. And your body already knows. It always has. There is something there. Something installed. Something that moves when you believe you're in control. And this is only the surface. Beneath it, there are deeper layers. Much deeper. You haven't reached them yet. Not now. But you will. If you stay. If you continue. If you don't turn away at the first sign of inner discomfort. Before going further, let me ask you something. Not as a routine request, but as an intimate pause. If this kind of silent reflection touches you, leave a like. Not for me. So that this rare kind of space continues to exist. So that others, still moving on autopilot without knowing why, can encounter it as you are now. Sometimes a small gesture keeps a quiet flame alive. Now we continue, because the most delicate part is still ahead. You haven't yet seen where all of this truly began. At the beginning, you had no defenses, no filters, no distance between what came from the outside and what became part of you. The world arrived unedited, raw, immediate, and you learned by watching, by feeling, by associating. You learned what felt safe, what felt dangerous, what earned approval, what brought withdrawal. All of this happened before complete sentences existed in your mind, before memory organized itself, before you knew any of it could one day be questioned. Every reaction around you acted as a silent mirror. A smile reinforced one behavior. A sharp glance erased another. Gradually, an internal rulebook formed without a single explanation. And invisible rules are the most powerful. They don't demand obedience. They create reflexes. And reflexes don't think. They act. You learned when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to hide what you felt, when to please, when to surrender. Not because someone explained it, but because your body detected patterns. And the body learns fast when emotional survival is involved. You needed to belong, to be accepted, to be seen. And for that, something inside you adapted. Not by choice, but by necessity. Every environment leaves an imprint. Every context carves a mark. And the earlier it happens, the deeper it goes. This isn't blame. It's structure. It's how the human mind organizes itself. It builds shortcuts, saves energy, automates responses. The problem begins when those shortcuts remain active decades later, in situations that no longer resemble the original ones. You respond to authority the way you once did. You approach conflict the way silence once taught you. You experience love through patterns shaped by instability. And you call it personality. You call it who you are. But what if it's simply who you had to be? This question doesn't demand an answer. It asks for resonance. Something inside you recognizes it. A faint unease, a distant echo, an emotional sense of déjà vu. Don't force anything. Just notice. See how some choices feel obvious without reason. How certain paths are avoided without explanation. How beliefs arrive fully formed, with no clear origin. They were there before doubt, before choice, and they still operate. They don't reveal themselves easily. They hide behind logic, behind convincing stories about your identity. But stories can be rewritten. Programs cannot, unless they're seen. And being seen is unsettling, because it exposes what once felt comfortable in the dark. You begin to realize that living on autopilot isn't a failure. It's a consequence of being shaped too early, too quickly, without the option to pause. And it doesn't stop there. There's another layer, more subtle, one that doesn't come only from close figures, but from the entire environment. The rhythms, the expectations, the repetitions. And that's where we're heading. Slowly, without urgency, because urgency itself is part of the conditioning. Beyond familiar voices, there was the background, the constant setting of your life, routines, schedules, definitions of success and failure. What deserved attention? What should be ignored? All of it formed a silent field of direction. You grew inside a narrative you didn't write, one that suggested how a life should unfold. And the more you drifted from it, the more an unexplained tension appeared, as if you were stepping out of place, as if something invisible was being violated. That feeling didn't come from nowhere. It was installed, repeated, normalized. You learned to compare before knowing why, to hurry without understanding where you were going, to distract yourself when silence felt threatening. The automatic became comfortable, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. Silent programming doesn't need force. It works through saturation, through repetition, values, images, expectations. Gradually, a worldview settles in, and then you forget it ever arrived. You believe it's always been yours, that you've always wanted this, thought this way. But look closely. Many desires come paired with anxiety, as if they're being pushed, as if they don't fully belong to you. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just the continuation of an old script, one you've never read, but perform daily. That's the trap. The more efficient the conditioning, the less visible it becomes. It disguises itself as choice, as taste, as strong opinion. And you defend it, not realizing you're protecting something older than you. This doesn't mean everything in you is false. It means there are layers, and some are never questioned. Awakening doesn't arrive all at once. It begins with cracks, small doubts, brief pauses between impulse and action. Those pauses are uncomfortable because in them, the automatic weakens. And when it weakens, emptiness appears. A strange emptiness. But maybe it isn't absence. Maybe it's space. Space for something not yet formed. You don't need to know what comes next. Just recognize that much of what guides you today was installed before choice was possible. That recognition alone alters the system. Automatic processes rely on unconsciousness. Once seen, they begin to falter. Not fully, not immediately, but enough to create friction. And friction is the beginning of change. There's more, because some beliefs don't just guide. They limit. They draw invisible boundaries around what you think is possible. Certain ideas function like fences you can't see, but feel when you get close. A sense of inadequacy, a subtle fear, a thought whispering, this isn't for you. These ideas feel natural, logical, obvious. That's why they're rarely questioned, but they're almost always inherited, absorbed, reinforced. They define the size of your ambition, the reach of your desire, the depth of your silence, and you move within them as if they were laws of nature. You don't realize they're constructs. The most effective conditioning doesn't cause constant pain. It creates comfortable conformity. You adapt, lower expectations, reduce questions, and call it realism, maturity, acceptance. But there's a difference between acceptance and resignation. One brings peace. The other leaves a quiet exhaustion that never fades. Notice that exhaustion. It isn't just for doing too much. It comes from maintaining an identity aligned with beliefs that may not be yours. This drains you, quietly. Automatic behavior doesn't require presence, only repetition, and so days repeat themselves. Conflicts return under different names. You feel something is stuck, but you don't know where to look, because the root isn't visible. It's foundational, installed early. Questioning this isn't destruction. It's understanding. It's bringing awareness where reaction once lived. And that's unsettling, because awareness brings responsibility. Not a burden, but a new kind of freedom. You can't say that's just how it is with the same innocence anymore. Slowly, patterns become visible. In you, in others, in the world. You see how repetition spreads ideas. How discomfort is avoided. How avoidance keeps structures intact. And something in you has already shifted, even if only slightly. A restless curiosity. A discomfort that refuses to disappear. Protect that discomfort. Don't numb it. Don't distract from it. It means a layer has been touched. And beneath it, there are older ones. Deeper ones. Where beliefs aren't thoughts, but sensations. Where the body reacts before the mind. Before you think, you feel. Before belief forms, the body has already responded countless times. Tightening, releasing, closing, opening. The body remembers what the mind forgets. And it remembers without words. That's why it's hard to access. And easy to confuse with intuition. Not every automatic reaction is intuition. Many are echoes of old environments, old contexts that no longer exist but still live inside you. Certain places make you contract. Certain people quiet you. Certain opportunities make you retreat. You explain it later, rationalize it, but the decision was already made elsewhere. That place was trained, repeatedly, consistently. Habit formed identity. Identity shaped destiny. To understand what feels blocked, observe your automatic responses. Not to judge them, just to see them. Seeing creates space. And in that space, real choice becomes possible. Awakening isn't an explosion. It's a gradual softening of rigid stories, of fixed beliefs. You realize many limitations aren't facts. They're inherited ideas, and ideas can be examined. Gently. Where did this come from? What did it take root? What did it protect? These questions don't assign blame. They bring clarity, and clarity liberates, even when it hurts. Especially then, because pain signals contact with something real, something long dormant. The automatic doesn't disappear. It becomes visible, and visibility changes everything. Before it commanded, now it suggests. There's space, a pause, and in that pause, choice is born. Imperfect, human, real. You become more attentive. At first, it's tiring. Presence requires energy, but then it brings a quiet alignment. Not resolution, honesty. Living unconsciously has a cost, paid in silent frustration, in the sense of always missing something undefined. When you begin to choose, even slightly, something ignites. A subtle power, not over life, but over yourself. And that changes how you move, how you speak, how you listen. Some beliefs dissolve under attention. Others remain, but now by choice. And that makes all the difference. The process doesn't end. There are always deeper layers. But you're no longer asleep. And once seen, it can't be unseen. You may try to return to autopilot, but something inside you will know. Looking back, you recognize moments you acted against yourself. Paths avoided, words withheld, dreams delayed, not from incapacity, but from quiet beliefs whispering caution. Awakening carries grief for the selves that never emerged. That grief matters because felt pain transforms. Ignored pain repeats. You're not here to accuse yourself. You're here to free yourself. Freedom isn't destruction. It's integration. Understanding what worked, why it worked, and whether it still belongs. Some beliefs protected you. They helped you survive. But survival isn't the same as living. And maybe now you're ready to choose. Slowly, in small moments. Each time you pause instead of react, something shifts. The path isn't straight. There are setbacks, confusion. That's part of it. What matters is direction. And the direction is inward, toward the point where beliefs were installed without consent. You can't change the past, but you can change your relationship with it. And that changes everything that follows. Over time, you notice how the world constantly pulls at your attention. Noise, urgency, distraction, all to keep you from staying with yourself. Because presence reveals layers, and layers disrupt autopilot. This isn't about escaping the world. It's about discernment. You choose more carefully what you consume, what you repeat, because you understand it feeds something. Awakening doesn't distance you from life. It brings you closer, rawer, less filtered. You feel more. It's intense, but alive. You don't need certainty, only presence. Doubts remain, but they inform rather than paralyze. This becomes a new way of being, built slowly, deepening quietly. As awareness stabilizes, discomfort softens into calm. Not certainty, trust. You don't need all the answers, only the right questions. You learn to listen to a quieter intuition, one not driven by fear. It doesn't shout, it points. Awakening isn't a destination. It's movement, practice, commitment. You stop being only a product of conditioning and become a participant in your experience. Imperfect, human, enough. Getting here wasn't accidental. Something in you chose to stay, to listen, to pass through discomfort instead of escaping. Awakening belongs to those who walk without guarantees. If this journey resonates, subscribing isn't an external act. It's an internal one, a sign of continuity. And leaving a like is recognition of a rare space where depth still exists. Choose what you watch next intentionally. Each piece here is part of a larger, ongoing narrative. The journey doesn't end. It deepens. And now that you feel it, you can't unfeel it. Continue. Walk. Observe. Awakening is silent and irreversible.